My message? And I sent you something this morning you may not have gotten from either today or tomorrow in the middle afternoon. Great. Excellent. Thanks. You had a good trip? You gonna get the tickets? All right, you just let me know what it is. Good. Do I know them? Well, I know Alan. I haven't seen him in a long time.
He said he's never been to a baseball game.
It's a rare experience, believe me. You know, I'm always with myself, but I'm always saying it's so nice to be at the ball game together. I'm with me for every game.
Yeah. That's a blessing and a curse.
You couldn't put it any better. There's no escape.
I've been trying most of my life to escape. The problem is you can't do it.
You can't do it, but we all try on occasion, that's for sure. The burden of being ourselves. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see all of you. Still winter out there, isn't it? What do we expect? The police officer said to me, it's Cleveland. We all know this. Okay, so thank you so much for bagel sponsorship, Doris Donnelly. Thank you. And picking up today as well. Double applause. Yeah. Okay, very good. Let's welcome to live streamers. Let's continue with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments and joining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so even though the Torah portion today is a double portion by Yakel Pekudei, which is Exodus 35 through 40, and you may remember our chiastic structure, ABCBA, which is the structure of the sections from chapter 25 through 40. So the A terms will be the same, and the B terms will be the same, and the C term will be itself. You recall that the A terms deal with space, the building of the tabernacle. And so chapter 25 through 31 are the instructions for the building of the tabernacle, which then culminates in a command to keep the Sabbath, primarily space and then time. And 35 to 40 replicates 25 to 31, but backwards. A, B, C, B, A. So the first two terms are A, B, the last two terms are B, A, which means 35 to 40 would start with time and then end with space, which is exactly what happens. Chapter 35 begins with a few verses about keeping Shabbat, and then it deals with the tabernacle. 25 to 31, instructions for the building of the tabernacle. 35 to 40, the implementation of those instructions. So that at the end of the book of Exodus, the tabernacle is concluded, God comes in, God's presence is so dense that Moses can't get in. We turn the page to the first verses of Leviticus, where God invites Moses in, and we have the book of Leviticus with all the instructions for the priestly caste. Okay, so the Torah portions for today, a double portion, includes 35 through 40. We're not going to do that today because we have started with the golden calf incident, which is the C term, A, B, C, B, A, the middle term, which is Exodus 32 through 34, the title of which, at least for me, is The Golden Calf Incident and Its Aftermath. Or to put it differently, the sin and then the attempt to restore the relationship between God and the people that has been interrupted by the golden calf incident. Okay? And you can see that the golden calf incident stands alone in a variety of ways. It's a unique episode with its aftermath. But rather than focus on what we might call the material and spiritual realities of the religion of ancient Israel, space and time, buildings and Shabbat, 32 through 34 plumbs the depths of human nature. Who are we? What are our vulnerabilities? What are our violations? What are our prospects? If the fundamental relationship between God and the people can be understood serially in one of two ways, the relationship is good, the relationship is bad. And the relationship is good and the relationship is bad falls back on human nature, where we are observant, we do follow the commandments and so on, we do the right thing, but we often get it wrong. And we're self-serving, or we're too frightened to be able to follow the commandments. So chapters 32 through 34 really works hard on this relationship between God and the people and the ways in which human nature can both lead to violation and to observance. Okay? So if anthropology doesn't fundamentally mean a department at the university, but the doctrine of what it means to be human, anthropos in Greek, logos, the doctrine of anthropos, of what it means to be human, chapters 32 through 34 is one of those sections that really tries to get to the bottom of who we are, how we go astray, and how we're able to restore the relationship. So that's, we started last week, and I think we all felt that we wanted to continue with this episode and see how it moves to its climax and its culmination. So if we turn to Exodus 32, this is what we looked at some length last week. We see Moses up there on the mountain, and he and God are looking down, and they see the people rioting and worshiping a golden calf because they're missing Moses. Where is our leader? Where is the one who's leading us through the wilderness? And so they appeal to Aaron to make them a representation of the leader. Maybe it's idolatry, maybe it isn't. In order to get a substitute presence in the absence of Moses. And we recall that God and Moses have a long conversation in which God says in verse 9 of chapter 32, the Lord further said to Moses, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them, and that I may destroy them, and make of you a great nation. I'm giving you the opportunity in this situation to become the new Abraham. And we remember in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, God experiments, and sometimes the experiment fails. Okay? Adam and Eve in the garden to tend the garden and to preserve it, and they violate the command, don't eat the fruit, and they do eat the fruit. And so there are consequences here. They leave the Garden of Eden, the first episode in normal time. You remember that the Garden of Eden provides the opportunity for immortality, eating from the tree of life. And they blow it. They eat from the tree of the fruit of good and evil. So that the Garden of Eden is the arena in which timelessness is possible. They've blown it. And I want to suggest that the Torah offers us different options throughout the Torah of the return to the Garden of Eden. Now figuratively. It doesn't need to be figurative, actually, because the Garden of Eden is still there. God doesn't destroy the garden. So it's possible in principle, let's say for future thinkers, interpreters, to find a way back to the Garden of Eden. Rabbinic Judaism creates the notion of life after death in two forms. Is a resurrection of the body and the immortality of the soul. Those are two ideas in Rabbinic Judaism, neither of which exists in biblical times. The Bible is steadfastly this worldly, has no interest in life after death. Let's call life after death something vertical. I go somewhere. And like the historical world is horizontal, passage through time. The Bible is steadfastly horizontal. It's not interested in the vertical in the sense of another world. In a certain way, in an interesting way actually, one of the philosopher Nietzsche's projects is to undermine the whole idea of the other world, which can be reflected in many ways. It can be life after death. It can be a world of reason. It can be the historical process coming to its climax and culmination. That for Nietzsche is the other world which has always beguiled us, essentially through the clergy, to sacrifice our independence for the sake of the promise of another world. And we can only get it by doing the right thing. And who defines the right thing? The clergy. And Nietzsche wants to try to say, there is no other world. We're facing this world with all its problems and prospects. And the key virtue for Nietzsche turns out to be courage. Courage to face reality without any mythology. I don't want to say that the Torah is a precursor of Nietzsche, but the project is the same. The Torah is trying to say to us that our lives and the prospects of our lives, for better or for worse, resides wholly in this world. And you've got to try to create a good society. And if you do create a good society, and this is part of the project of the prophets, this can be understood figuratively as a return to the Garden of Eden. In other words, the Garden of Eden still exists, though possibly in other forms. The land of Israel is the Garden of Eden, land of milk and honey. The problem is, getting there is not enough. Once you get there, you have to create the good society. That's only the beginning. So in a way, it's a false view of Eden, as if by arriving, we're back to Eden. You see what I mean by Eden here. And so the project of working through and in history is never concluded. There are always problems whenever we arrive. Okay, the land of milk and honey provides the platform, but it itself is not the thing itself. Okay, so let's go here to the connection to what we're going to be doing now is going back to the Garden of Eden, is that who creates the reality of the good society? God and human beings. God creates the blueprint and says to human beings, create something with it. And so the ongoing possibility of this felicity depends upon the ways in which the two major players in the drama act, God and human beings. And in this story, chapters 32 to 34, we're seeing both at work in a certain sense, undermining the covenant and then finding a way to restore it, as if to be a kind of model for the career of people through history. We can blow it, we can go in the wrong direction, but we also have the capacity to restore it and start again. So the historical life in history is never over. The Bible does not suggest that it's ever over. Sometimes it indicates a kind of idea of it, to love justice, to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God, is Micah chapter 6's view of what it means to live a felicitous life. So there are articulations of it, but the story continues and never is fully climaxed, which I think is extremely courageous. If I were the author or the editor of this book, I would say to myself, by the time I get to, I don't know where, Psalms, I got to bring this story to an end. I mean, what's the ending? And the biblical author and editor always resist the temptation to end the story. And so the story continues with us as part of this adventure, for better or for worse. Okay, so we're in chapter 32 and verse 9, where God says, this is God's role in whether he's going to stick with the story or not. I'm bolting from the story. I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Let me be that my anger may blaze forth against them. I may destroy them and make you a great nation. We're going to bring the episode to a halt. We're going to have a vacuum here for a little while, then I'm going to start over again with you. I started with Adam and Eve. That didn't work out. Cain and Abel didn't work out. The violence increased. The whole project of humanity didn't work out. I'm sick and tired of this, God says. He was sorry that he created human beings. You remember that line. But fortunately, there was one guy who walked with God. He wasn't quite Abraham yet. Abraham walked before God. Noah walked with God. Abraham was a vanguard person. Noah was just a good person who didn't succumb to all the depredations of that era. And the project starts again. And God says, I'm never going to destroy the earth again by flood. And he goes on. So this is yet another moment in which it looks like the project has come to an end, but he's got a new beginning in mind. Verse 11, but Moses implored the Lord his God, and what Moses does now is he exhibits loyalty to the people. Please don't destroy the people. We want this project to continue the way you started it. So here Moses exhibits, I don't know exactly what the right word is, let's say humility. He had the opportunity to be the new Abraham, start it all over again. But Moses, you made some promises, and I'm holding you to those promises, and the story has to continue. And notice that Moses doesn't just scream at God and have a tantrum and try to get God to yield over and against Moses' outcries. Moses uses rational arguments, which is pretty amazing. Moses reasons with God, and of course, any process of reason begins with premises. What's the foundation of the argument you're now going to pursue? Moses' premises are not abstractions. They're not hopes. They're what God has done. In other words, the premise is, this is what you did, and are you going to be faithful to what you said? So I call this the Promethean moment, where Moses storms the heavens. Not in order to destroy them, but in order, Prometheus storms the heavens and steals fire from the gods and brings it to human beings. Fire now being the necessary condition for the possibility of culture. So what Prometheus seems to do is to undermine the prerogatives of the gods and create independent human culture. So this is really a violation of the moral order. I think that Moses does something similar, but his arguments are restorative, not revolutionary. And what he's trying to restore is the reality and implications of what God has said and done. You promised the patriarchs that you would be with this people. Verse 13. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Israel is Jacob, of course. How you swore to them by yourself. You brought a witness when you made this promise. And the witness you brought was the most credible witness of all. Yourself. You swore in your own name, I guess we're in the middle of, where are we here? Middle of 13. I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring this whole land of which I spoke to possess forever. Remember the initial promises. I will make you a great nation, and I will give you this land. Neither has happened yet. Are you going to make good on your promises? If you don't, either you've reneged or you're not strong enough to get them going. But in other words, Moses explores the logic of promises. Promising is a very interesting move. Promising creates a new reality, the reality of obligation. which doesn't exist until you make a promise. And that, if I make a promise to somebody, I've lost control to a certain degree, because my promise is as an obligation to which I can be held responsible. So God has created a reality. This isn't just a matter of, I'll have some chocolate ice, give me some chocolate ice cream, which is the end of the matter. Promising is a very different kind of locution. And Moses is calling his attention to, of all things, the logic of promises. By the way, God, you understand what it means to make a promise? It's not just something that can be tossed off and then ignored. It creates a reality that is outside of you in the real world. And you can't destroy this people. You promised that you were going to make them a great nation and to give them the land. Neither has happened yet. They are something of a people, but a people in creation, moving through the wilderness, getting ready to go to the promised land, then to explore and to expand. Okay? So not only did you make a promise, but those promises haven't come to pass yet. What are you going to do about this? Gee, you're right. Then God, 14 said, and the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon this people. I guess we need to go back to 11. Moses implored the Lord his God, saying, let not your anger blaze forth again, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with a great power and with a mighty hand. So God has shown God's self to be mighty enough to do those great deeds in Egypt. The plagues, the deliverance, the splitting of the sea. Wow, what does this mean? That God's project is now going to be moving toward realization. Verse 12. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he delivered them. I mean, you bring a people out, you make all these miracles happen for the people, and then you want to destroy them in the wilderness. How's that going to look? It looks like you either are not strong enough or you didn't mean it in the first place. And if you want to be seen as soul power, S-O-L-E, you got to come through on what it is you started. Because the Egyptians, and by extension anybody else who knows about this, will say that you're a false god or you're a limited god and that your whole project never had a possibility of realization at all. So the premises are God's promise and God's act, words and deed, and Moses holds God to both of them. So I thought it's quite a remarkable act of bravery on Moses' part. And what's God's response? There are two possibilities. How dare you talk to me this way? That's not how God responds. God recognizes that Moses is right. Verse 14. And the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon his people. Okay? So Moses convinces God, not through power, but through reason. The power of reason here. Mike?
I can't help but think that this, how to say this, it makes the covenant more powerful than God himself. In other words, I could imagine God's response being, I'm God, and I can do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how dare you? How dare you question me?
And that is not what happens.
Right. What happens is that God subordinates his omnipotence to the covenant.
I like that. That God subordinates his omnipotence, meaning he can do whatever God wants. But he recognizes the implications of the commitment. By the way, later on in the history, when God has sent one prophet after another to warn the people that they're violating the covenant by immoral activity, to turn themselves around, because if you don't follow the mitzvot, there's going to be consequences. And the direst consequence of all is exile. And that's what happens. Finally, after 15 literary prophets, 15 books of the Bible named for prophets, plus a bunch of non-literary prophets like Elijah and Elisha, for whom biblical books are not named, it looks like a violation of what you're talking about, because God decides, we might say, to annul the covenant. So in principle, it looks like God can annul the covenant. Even though he binds himself here to the covenant, he can annul it. But what happens? God calls the people back from Babylonia and starts again. What looks like an annulment of the covenant really displays God's fidelity to it, but now perilously, because it looks like God can violate it, but God decides not to violate and to bring the people back and to do the thing all over again. Then we have the destruction of the second temple and so on. So that's an interesting point. What's the relationship between God's power and the power of the covenantal action? And it looks like there's something dialectical about it. The covenant is predominant, but God is predominant. And so, the biblical author and editor is really creating a complex dynamic about how the historical process works. Maybe in order to accommodate all kinds of unexpected events. The premise being that's an eternal covenant. Maya?
I look at other way. You said he's using logic.
Yes.
Think he's using psychology.
Okay. But would you accept this, that the psychology that he is using is the persuasive value of a good argument? If I show you on the basis of an undeniable premise that certain implications follow and they haven't followed, will you agree with the conclusion that you are the problem here? Now, let's suppose somebody said that to me, just that, and I might say, I don't care at all. So that would be psychological. I have the power not to dignify the potency of reason. But reason here seems to maybe that's unfair, seems to persuade God. He could have said no.
I don't know if it's reason. I mean, what kind of God are you going to be? If people will think what a fickle guy he is.
Yes.
I think it's a psychological persuasion.
Very, very good. So Maya's point here is that, I'm just going to repeat your language. Fundamentally, he's appealing to God's psyche, to God's sense of God's self. What are people going to think? Oh my gosh, I don't want them to think I'm not really God. So that's a good point. Would you go so far as to say the logical arguments, my language, are placed front and center, but they really aren't. There's something more potent, and that is God's egoism, God's humanity. Jim?
If you could think of it in terms of a chess game, acknowledging that God's in charge no matter what, it just reaffirms that he picked the right guy.
Namely, I don't quite follow you here.
He picks
Yes.
or strength to challenge him.
Yeah.
And so he knew how this was going to come out from the get-go. God wasn't convinced of anything. He was in charge from start to finish. It just reaffirmed that Moses was the right choice.
You think that God felt that Moses' arguments were things that he had already, God's self, accepted the logic of, and that Moses was just playing a part that was unnecessary because God was in charge all along?
No, I'm saying God knew Moses' personality more than Moses knew it. And he knew how this was going to go. Because, by our all admission, God's all-knowing. God's got the plan from start to finish. It was a similar test that Abraham and Isaac did.
Yeah. So when God says to Moses here in verse 11, in verse 10, let me alone, that my anger, he knew that Moses was not going to let him alone, and he was just goading him to do what he knew Moses would do. And what's the point there? To elevate Moses? God doesn't need elevation.
No, it's to reaffirm the whole project.
Why did he need Moses to argue with him in order to reaffirm the project?
Because of what they've done with the golden calf.
Okay, all right. Wait, yeah, Steve.
To take that argument a little bit further, God is giving Moses experiences in arguing with him, and he'll be able to use that experience in leading the people. In that he knows that God understands that there will be challenges for Moses in leading the people, and if Moses has the confidence that he can talk to God and argue with God and to some extent reason with God, then Moses in some ways does not fear the consequences. Moses now knows he can come out of this experience and not be killed, because that's something he's going to be using. So God, in some ways, it's kind of like a test, but it's also like a teaching, evolving Moses.
So Steve's point in argumenting with God, you took that back. I'm teasing you a little bit, is this is spring training. Let's get Moses ready for the start of the real season. The real season is going to happen soon when the people show you their own power. And how strong are you? And so I'm going to strengthen you. So the difference between these 2 points of view, mine and yours, so to speak, is that if I can get away with this, for me, Moses and God in this episode are on the same level. Moses is reasoning with God, and God is following the logic of reason and acceding. So in a certain sense, Moses has defeated God, even though the let me alone part suggests that he's inviting Moses to come into this argument. Whereas your argument, I think that Jim's is, God remains on a level higher. And you can't really say in biblical religion that it's like this. That in a way is what's behind what you're saying here. And I think it's powerful. But I do love the notion that God, this is the idea in a way of tzimtzum. You know what tzimtzum is? The self-limiting. So the Kabbalists have the idea that at the beginning of the world, beginning of the universe, God is everywhere. And God decides that God wants something else but God's self. So he limits himself in order to make room for something else, a world, human beings, which is a kind of humbling. He's willing to become smaller. The idea of tzimtzum is really one of the premises of my point of view, that God is really willing to either diminish his stature or play the role of a diminished stature so that Moses can be emboldened. Willing to play the role kind of captures both of our views. God is up here, but he's willing to be here functionally. Vivian.
So I'm looking at the timeline here. God knows something that Moses doesn't know.
What is it?
Moses hasn't come down yet.
Yeah.
Moses has not seen what's going on. God saw what's going on.
Yeah.
And God is aware that when Moses sees this, he's going to go nuts. So I would suggest that God is playing this role, as you put it, to prepare Moses to be maybe more generous,
More generous.
more accepting. I mean, he goes nuts anyway. But he gets to think about it. God is forcing him to think about not only God's promise, but his own promise to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And his own role in the world. The Egyptians could say, hey, Moses took them out and look what happened.
Yes.
So Moses is thinking it through, and Moses has decided that the project is worth pursuing.
I like that. That this whole colloquy here is among other things, preparation for Moses' role that's going to emerge immediately. And what Moses shows is the capacity for righteous anger and for loyalty to the project. And that's exactly how Moses acts. He gets angry, but he is also willing to go back to God and to say, hey, wait a minute, this project needs to continue. So that's my spring training image here. He's ready for the big time. The big time is not up there with God. The big time is when he comes down and sees what is happening to his project. What's he going to do? And you're right, he goes nuts, but then he recovers, doesn't he? David?
So I really agree with Tim and Stephen.
Against me?
But I want to point out another function that this scene has, which is God is establishing in the text here that God will abide by the covenant. And the point then is, we have to abide by the covenant too. In other words, if we're tempted to say, oh, this is all a waste of time, no, even God was willing to stick with the covenant, so we should stick with the covenant. And that, after all, is the goal of the entire text, to get us to commit to following what it says in the text.
That's interesting. And when you think about the chiastic structure of the last chapters of Exodus, what we're dealing with in the A terms, the building of the Mishkan, and the B terms, the abiding by the laws of Shabbat, are all in some sense objectively described. Here are the laws, here are the rules, here are the materials. The question is, none of these materials implements itself. The Mishkan isn't built by itself. You get the wood and whatever, it doesn't put itself together. Shabbat is not observed by itself. So all the time and space spent on these items in space and time depend for their realization to the players in the drama. And that's God and the people. And that's what the C term, the golden calf incident, is exploring. We've got a wonderful plan for the Mishkan, but if people aren't committed to building it and to acting in a certain way, What difference does it make that you've got a perfect structure? So, folks, what are we going to say about the players? And these chapters tell us about the players. It's going to be a rough go, lots of impediments. But so far, it looks like both the major players, God and the leader, are willing to both face the problems and to go on anyway. So the C term here, 32 through 34, really lays the foundation for some optimism in the context of realism. People go astray, but they're willing to come back. Doris, I think your hand has been up.
Yes. Well, one of the things I love about Exodus is that we have a fully functioning family, supportive of each other. And for the first time, we have two brothers who support each other. For me, one of the most touching stories is when Moses can't hold his hands up in prayer, and Aaron comes along and holds up Moses' arm. So, with regard to what we're talking about right now, I buy the cleverness of the rational argument. But I wonder if, to Maya's point, whether Moses is also thinking about Aaron. Aaron is going to be decimated if this plan of God is going to be executed. His brother is going to be like his family, but his brother in particular. So, in Deuteronomy 9, when Moses retells this story, Moses says, I knew the fury of God, and I thought of you, Aaron, and I prayed for you in particular that you wouldn't be decimated.
That's nice.
So the rational argument was there, but also there was an emotional attachment, connection. My brother, whom I love, is going to die.
Right, I am my brother's keeper.
Yes. No, but he tells it explicitly later on in Deuteronomy.
So here's what I'm thinking while you're saying this. One of the ways of understanding the genre of this story is that it's a novel. And what do great novels do? They talk about the complexities of plot and character. If you have wooden figures, you don't have a great novel. You have to put the figure into motion, your protagonist, and to really draw out that person's complexity in the light of the vicissitudes of the plot. How does this protagonist deal with temptation, deprivation, and so on? And the more complex and elegantly, it has to be elegant, that the novel is rendered, the greater a novel it is. Isn't this true? The novel, like poetry, tells us the truth. Aristotle makes a distinction between history and poetry. History talks about events. Poetry tells us about what is always true. Poem tells us what's always true. A novel tells us, through particulars, what is always true about the human condition. The greatest novels are eternally timely. And what Doris is pulling out here, but we all have, is that this story can be understood and the figures in a variety of ways. And which of them is right? I mean, it seems to me that the various comments that have been made all have cogency to them. So that the author here, I don't mean this to denigrate it, as well as a soaring story, this is also written with a realism about the complexities of plot and character. So it becomes a universal story. I'm not the first one to say this. I mean, why in the heck are we reading it every week forever? Because every week, every time we get back to it, wow, something new shows itself, which probably is a function of our changing in our own lives, different needs, different perspectives, to see the same story in different ways. Joe?
Not as profound as Doris's argument, but if we combine your comment, why are we reading it? God didn't need to do any of this, right? He's all powerful. So I'm gonna put us in this room in this story. So God wanted to create this, right? So we would be here. So he's playing a game, and he wants his game to be interesting. If he did everything, there'd be no game to play, because everything would be controlled.
Yeah.
If he did nothing with no rules, the game wouldn't be interesting, because he wouldn't know how it was gonna turn out, and he wanted to have some control. So he creates the Tanakh, he creates this story for us, because stories are easy to access. And he's very happy that we're here today, studying this, because he's seeing how we're playing with this story that he's created.
Yeah.
And how we're grappling with it, because it makes his game more interesting, because he's not exactly sure how we're gonna turn out, but he got to create some of the rules. He created the game with some of the rules. And
Right.
he's watching us play with the rules.
Oh, that's really nice. And I suppose game theory, that it has rules, it has a goal, but it's complex enough to be played in a variety of different ways. So it's both got structure and flexibility. And we think of the games that we love, the real games, the ball games, the baseball, the basketball, and so on, have been played forever, because every new game within the same structure is a very different game. And God is very happy that we're continuing to play the game. Your comment, Joe, I think is similar to Maya's, that there's some psychology going on here too, in God's mind, so to speak. How do I get the game to be played, and what's my role in it? Larry?
You think that the Torah is trying to tell us that we can question God and reason with God, as opposed to maybe some religions where everything is laid out straight and that's the way we do it?
Right. Yes, I think there are three possibilities. One is that God is the boss, period. The other is we're the boss, period. And the third is we play together. I'm using play in a very serious way now. As long as we both, to play a game is to presuppose some kind of commitment. That is, commitment to what's the right way to play the game. Oh gosh, it reminds me of a famous play in baseball. I'm gonna suppress it, because we both have to be committed to the integrity and power of the game, and therefore play by the rules in some way. And in some sense, they come here to play by the rules. Moses is upset, but he exhibits loyalty. God is willing to abandon the people, but he's persuadable. So that, I think you're right. See, there are two kinds of arguing, let's say, with authority. One does it just to make oneself feel big. And the other is that the rules of the game require clarification, and I'm going to challenge you because I need clarification from you, but the reason for challenging is not to boost my ego, but to clarify how the game should be played. So there are assumptions behind the Promethean element. This is my language here. The assumption is Moses is just not trying to destroy God or to bolt from the project, but to clarify the project, just exactly what is the project and who are you. Margie?
It makes me think of Klein in his books on the prophets, if I remember right, that the genius of the prophets are that they can contain God and man in a single thought.
I love that. Yeah, Margie, quoting Heschel here, that the genius of the prophets is they can hold God and human beings in the same thought. I love that. Yeah. For all of Heschel's problems in terms of coherence, he is really the poet of the religious life. He is really able to draw out the power of what it means to live in a certain mode. Lou?
I'm going to put the shoe on the other foot. I think in this section here, God saying, well, you know, he says, you know, if I tear up the book and start all over again, it's not going to make a difference. We're going to get the same result. Then, you know, this is, you know, I'm not, this may be heretical, but I'm not perfect, and things that I created, they're not perfect either, and, you know, we're gonna come through, you know, we're gonna just go through the same old story again, and I've wasted all this effort I'm making. So God figured out we have this covenant here to remind God that things are imperfect, but we're gonna, you know, they believe in me, and, you know, and I think that's worthwhile, and let's continue with you know, let's try to make the best we can with what we have.
Right.
Rather than starting all over again. So I think that's, you know, this is a realization for, you know, that Moses is reminding him, he says, well, you know, we're not, you know, things aren't perfect. That's why we have this covenant.
So Lou's point is that both realize, although Moses seems to realize it first, that what's the point of starting all over again, destroying the now, to start all over again, when really the same thing is going to happen? So why not just deal with the situation that you have and not have an unrealistic expectation? I think that's a powerful point with the following exception. It's a principled exception. You remember that when God faces in the book of Genesis all kinds of resistance, the contemporaries of Noah, and then the builders of the Tower of Babel, God doesn't just decide, the situation is going to be the same. God makes a new move. So God's new move is to call the single one, Abraham, through whom all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So God makes a qualitative move by getting Abraham. Later on, God makes another new move. He gives the Torah on Mount Sinai. Up to that point, in a certain way, human beings were surviving on their own resources. Now God gives us a blueprint for how to build a just society. In the time of the judges, they get in the promised land, there's Joshua, the conquest, and all the problems and possibilities, and then the judges. And you remember, things run aground in the cycle of judges until the last sentence in the book of Judges is something like, things are bad because there was no king in Israel. And this gives God the chance or the realization that something unprecedented needs to happen, to call a king. And he calls Saul. And Saul turns out to be something of a disaster. And God learns from that there are certain attributes. If you want a king, you need somebody charismatic and you need a poet. David's the poet. So it's not as if when we face a crisis, We haven't recognized that let's just get on with it because it's going to all happen again. There is such a thing as innovation in order to solve some of the problems on the ground. You remember the rabbis, for example, when they are arguing about halachic points. You remember this famous story where God interferes and says, no, it's Rabbi Joshua. He's the guy who's got the right view. And there are miracles to support it. You remember the schoolhouse begins to totter, but the walls only go this far in deference to this rabbi, but they go this far in deference to this rabbi. And then the river reverses its course. God is showing that God is the ultimate arbiter. But what do the rabbis say? The rabbis, Lo Bashamayim here, they quote they don't quite quote Charles Dickens. They quote God. Here's what you said in the Torah. It is not in heaven. Namely, you gave the Torah to us, and now we are in charge of Jewish law. And you gave us the principles by which we should argue about Jewish law. So stay out of it. And we're saying this in your name. So this is a moment of radical discontinuity when the rabbis take charge. So, it would be interesting to find other examples of discontinuity. Sure, human nature is always the same in some ways, but our resources change. I mean, David turns out to be a corrupt king. Nevertheless, he is the anticipation of the just king to come, whom, of course, Christians come to see as Jesus. But the Hebrew Bible tradition, I'm saying, doesn't look in that direction. Ellen?
If I were God, and I would be looking down today and saying, these are a corrupt people, an unjust people, testing my authority people, but that this passage practicing today, forgiving us.
Nice point. Ellen's point is there's corruption today. I mean, my goodness, the world we live in at this moment. But God is a forgiving God. And another way of saying that is there's always a chance to turn it around. I always remember Heschel's comment in this regard. I've quoted it several times. I'm an optimist against my better judgment. And that's what it is, isn't it? It's optimism is an as-if gesture. I'm going to act as if the situation can be improved. Otherwise, giving up is just not an option. Arthur.
So, first of all, I love this discussion and grateful to yours. I never really appreciated the role of brothership in this.
Yeah.
But, a couple things. One is, I love that we're concentrating on this story. I wonder, in different eras and historical moments, whether if we gathered in different culture, whatever, this would be our key story or not. Because when I think about our discussion of Revelation at Sinai, I don't think it hits as deep as this story for us. Mm-hmm. This story, just listening to the room, hits very deeply in all sorts of different directions. And the other thing I want to follow up on something Vivian said is that where are we in the narrative? So from what I can gather, the people, I think, heard the Ten Commandments. But then they said, we don't want to hear anymore. Moses, you listen to the rest and report. They haven't gotten that report yet. So you could make the argument they have not concluded the covenant yet.
Interesting.
And maybe they haven't violated the covenant here. And the other twist in the story is this revolt is taking place at Mount Sinai.
Yes.
The mountain's probably still warm.
Smoking.
Hot.
Yeah.
They can can smell the sulfur, they remember the lightning or that long ago. And so it is rather, talk about a novel, if you're setting the stage, you're going to have revolt at the smoldering foot of Mount Sinai, waiting to hear the rest of the covenant, and maybe the next day. Moses said he'd come back in 40 days. Okay, maybe it's 40 and a half, but they're going to hear it soon. So the revolt comes at this extraordinarily dramatic time, and there's something about this that really appeals to us.
Yeah.
There's that little romantic notion that the hero of a story is one who revolts against God. Prometheus is a romantic hero, and William Blake talks on and on about the greatest power of a human is revolt against absolute authority.
Yeah.
There's something about this story that runs very deep to us. I don't know if that's throughout human history, but it certainly does in our era.
Yeah, I like it. One of the things that your comment suggests is the vulnerability of the people. The Sinai's behind them. We might assume that they have the whole game, they have the whole thing. But you point out that they say to Moses, you continue here, we can't handle the proximity, but they haven't heard the report. So on, and the mountain is quaking and so on. So you've added another element to what it means to be the people, and that is vulnerability, fear, anxiety. And how do we act when we're feeling anxious? We sometimes do things to salve our anxiety that we regret after. And by the way, the people do regret it and become more faithful, so to speak, always to fall again. Let's go on a little bit here. So now we're in verse 15. Well, let's look at 14, the end of this section. Verse 14, and the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon his people. Thereupon Moses turned and went down from the mountain bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, tablets inscribed on both their surfaces, which is interesting in itself. They were inscribed on the one side and on the other. The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing, incised upon the tablets. When Joshua heard the sound of the people, you remember Joshua goes halfway up the mountain with Moses. So Moses is at the top of the mountain, and Joshua's halfway. When Joshua heard, there is a saying that hearing is not seeing. Seeing is more precise than hearing. So all he has done here is heard the noise. When he has heard the sound of the people in its boisterousness, and the word boisterous in the Hebrew, we have what we call a koreh and a ketiv. We have what is written, and we have how the rabbis have vocalized it. And we have, if you have a Hebrew text, we have Beit Resh Ayin Hey without vocalization. That's how it looks in the scroll. But it's rendered Berei O, which contains the word Rea, which means evil. Although that's just one of many translations of this, where it's not sure exactly what it meant. And the rabbis recognize we don't exactly know, so they render it. They give it one rendering of many possible. When Joshua heard the sound of the people in its boisterousness, or if you take the little particle there, ra, evil, in their evil is another possibility, re'ah. He said to Moses, this is the cry of war in the camp. But he answered, it is not the sound of the tune of triumph. Now you can see if you have the Hebrew text that this is rendered as poetry, 3 lines, parallel lines. This is not the sound of the tune of triumph, or the sound of the time of defeat. It is the sound of song that I hear. That's very cryptic. For those who have the Hebrew, let me just make this comment. The word anot is used 3 times. The first two times, it does not have what we call a dagesh, a dot in the middle root letter. So the first is anot, no dagesh. The second is anot. The third is anot with a dagesh. The dagesh creates a PL, that's one of the forms, verb forms, which is an intensification of the verb. So it's sometimes translated distress, not song. A note can be song, but here song doesn't make a lot of sense. There is a sense of intensification here. It's not the sound of the song of triumph or the sound of the tune. It's the sound of distress that I hear. I like that interpretation because that's what's going on. The people are really anxious at this particular point. Just a little bit of a nicety here. As soon, verse 19, as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dam, became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. So what's nice here psychologically is that if Moses understood what was happening while he's up the top of the mountain with God, for the sake of dealing with God's anger, Moses suppresses his own rage. He's able to discipline himself in order to deal with God. He's got God to handle. Now that God has been handled, Moses can express what he was feeling all along. See the idea here? And shattered them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it. He ground it to powder, strewed it upon the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Moses, talk about anger. Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" And Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know that this people is bent on evil. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us.' For that man Moses who brought us down from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." So I said to them, "Whoever has gold, take it off." They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and to my great surprise, it came out this calf. I mention in this regard often Schoenberg's great atonal opera, Moses and Aaron. And at this point, he mocks Aaron for his casual behavior here. So this is a good example of how music or poetry can draw out something of the emotion, or at least how we understand a scene. So Moses saw that the people were out of control, and since Aaron had let them get out of control. So by the way, this is, as Doris pointed out, brotherhood, but also now there is a gap between them because Moses has now seen that Aaron to some degree is culpable here, or shares the culpability. So again, 25. Saw that the people were out of control since Aaron had let them get out of control, so they were a menace to anybody who might oppose them. Moses stood up in the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come here." And all the Levites rallied to him. Okay? He said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put a sword on his thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay brother, neighbor, and kin." Okay? So he's got his patrol, he arms them, and he says, "This is what I want you to do." No, that's not what he says. This is what God wants you to do. By the way, Michael Walzer, in his wonderful book, Exodus and Revolution, makes the following point about this moment. This is when a certain vanguard or leader quotes an authority that hasn't really authorized your action in order to elevate the imperative force of what you're asking. In other words, Moses takes control here in a, we might say, an authoritarian way, quoting a source that didn't say it. Now, we don't know that God didn't say it, but the Torah does not say God said it to Moses. So this is a very dramatic political moment of a leader assuming more authority than he might in an authorized way have. Paul?
You just said Moses took control.
Yes.
Did he take control or did he lose control? Because in all honesty, I've always thought this section is very hypocritical of Moses. Moses, we read and he's calming God down, God gets calmed down, and then Moses does exactly what God would have done only in human form.
Right. Yes, I get your point. So Paul is saying over and against, not over and against. I said Moses takes control, but here you're saying Moses loses control and exhibits the behavior that he had talked God out of. And I might say, just in Moses' favor here, he talked the big authority out of the kind of action that only God could take. And having done that, he then feels more emboldened to let his own emotions be explored. Yeah, but nevertheless, he's now creating a kind of coup, a putsch against his own people here. David?
Well, but before he does this, he says, whoever is for Adonai,
Yes.
come with me.
Yeah.
And so the people that he's slaying are the people who have taken the position that they're against God.
Yeah.
Well, the Levites are with,
The Levites are what, David?
the Levites are with Moses.
Are with Moses.
The point is that Moses invites everybody who is with God to his side. So it's not an indiscriminate act where you just wipe out the entire people.
Although if I'm one of those that was against God, and Moses said, everybody who's with God, come to me, I'm going there. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Mike?
I can't resist saying something about that. There is this implication that if you don't go, then you're against God, right? This is, I always think like the Union of Concerned Scientists implies that if you're not a member, you're not concerned, right? And so, and it's not quite that simple, but anyway. What I'm thinking about is the shadow of Jethro here.
Well,
What's that?
what do you mean by this?
Well, when Moses embarked on this journey, he had this wise counsel who, if I recall correctly, basically said, this is not for the faint of heart, but you've got to take responsibility.
And also get some help.
Yeah. Yeah. And now he's on his own. But, I guess what I want to say is that if I were in Moses' shoes, I would be thinking to myself, if Jethro were on my shoulder here, what would he tell me?
And we could, I think, with some confidence infer what he would say. And in a way he does it. Get some help.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just do it himself, he conscripts, guess who? The Levites. This is seen by some commentators as the moment of the authorization of the Levites to be the guardians of the Mishkan. Because they express loyalty. At some point he says, I don't have the passage actually. Judy?
It's a very troubling text in light of today.
Yes.
It's the kind of text that is exploited with religious extremism.
Yes, you got
It's
it.
troubling to think that if you're for the Lord, you go and slay your fellow, human being, like fellow Jew. And it's very divisive. Like Moses is being quite divisive in this song. You're either for the Lord or not for the Lord. And you're either a patriot, you're not a patriot. You're either
So Judy's point, I'm repeating it for live streamers, is that this is really not only a problematic text, but in some ways an awful text. It authorizes summary justice, and one can use violence and force to do it. And you can make the claim, as Moses does, is this is authorized by God. This is what God wants. You know, where is it said somewhere? Is it in Shakespeare that even the devil can quote the Bible to his benefit? And one could, I mean, with some cogency, argue that this Bible opens the door for all this kind of barbarous action in the name of religion. Actually, next month, or maybe it's in May, I'm reviewing a book by, what's his name, Jonathan Sachs, with the title Not in God's Name, where he's arguing that it's not religion that is the source of this kind of action, but human nature. So that's what he's trying to do. But look, I mean, if people in the West Bank wanted some scriptural authorization for summary action, hey, you've got your text here. I mean, this is not Ploni Almoni. Ploni Almoni is the Hebrew John Doe. This isn't John Doe saying this is what God wants. This is the big guy. And whose authority is greater than Moses speaking in God's name? And so lots of awful stuff can be rendered from this text. It's scary. It's scary. Steve?
I want to parallel. God calls the people stiff-necked. Aaron calls the people bent on evil.
Oh, very okay. Good.
And God made man and called him very good.
Yeah.
But God, in several instances, sort of shades that a bit in terms of what is the true nature of people.
Yeah.
But when I see that Aaron is calling the people evil, in some ways, I think he's somewhat complicit in what Moses then does, because basically Aaron's saying these folks are just evil. In fact, they should be killed. So Aaron, in somehow reporting it, tries to reduce his role and blame the people. And Moses, upon hearing that, because that's the information he has, then acts perhaps more brutally than he might otherwise.
It's a good point. So Steve is making the point that Aaron really is giving support to whatever Moses' inclinations are, is really saying the same thing as Moses is saying, and therefore the two of them, in a way, are complicitous and add to each other's, the quality of each other's action. Yeah.
And I note that God does not call this a sin. Moses calls it a sin.
Okay, all right. Although God is, he says stiff-necked. Okay, different from sin. By the way, in one passage, I can't remember where, stiff-necked is seen as a positive thing. Namely, we're been determined to go on here with the project, even with all the resistance.
My
It's not,
point is that God does not call the over half a sin. Moses does.
yeah. Don't you think, though, that that's implicit in what God is saying? I see this stiff-necked
Well,
people.
I'm arguing that it's all about Moses and how he is reading this situation, aided and abetted by Aaron, who is slanting, perhaps, what actually went on.
But you're not saying that this is a subjective judgment on Moses' part.
I am getting pretty close there.
You think that in some broader sense, let's say in God's mind, this was not a sin of large proportions?
I could argue along the lines of Arthur that they didn't know how profound is and acts upon that, along with Aaron, sort of with a little yellow journalism, making it much more evil than it is.
So my inference from what you're saying is that one could understand this whole story, including God, as being a bit more tolerant of, and this is Arthur's point here, seeing the situation the people are in, and they're frightened and anxious, and they're out in the wilderness by themselves, and they do something that God does not find to be idolatrous, that the real judgment.
It's not a violation.
Okay.
They didn't know.
Right.
It's idolatrous, but they didn't understand.
They didn't know.
It's a violation.
And therefore, let's be a little kinder to the people. Yeah.
Merciful.
Well,
They did hear the first command.
it is true, though, isn't it? I see the cogency of the argument, I really do. But isn't this story really so decisive in the violation of something, let's say the covenant, and then Moses pleading with God, we haven't gotten there yet, to get back in the game? Because it says here, God says to them, I can't remember exactly well, where I'm going to send a messenger to lead you. And Moses says finally, look, you made this promise. We need you to lead us. But so God's reaction at the beginning and in the moment that I just suggested makes this very pivotal, doesn't it? In terms of the vulnerabilities of human consistency or devotion over and against certain pressures. It doesn't seem to be enough, though I see the argument, that the people are anxious and they don't know what's going on, and it's Moses and not God, and Moses with Aaron. Somehow I think it's more serious than that. I'm not suggesting you're not saying it's serious, but I think you've diminished a little bit the culpability of the people.
Yes, and I think, well, in the whole, are humans by their nature evil? God is not completely in that camp.
No.
What God sees is potential.
Oh, sure.
In human beings.
That's true.
Both for good and evil. And one way of reading this piece of it is, good does not prevail. And,
Serious bad. Yeah, by the way, in the creation story, I think there are 2 days on which God does not say, and it was good. Day 2, with the creation of the heavens, and day 6, the creation of human beings. I don't think it ever says on day 6, and God, like it does all the other days, and God saw that it was good. Because, as you make the point, human beings can be good or evil. This is our making. It's not part of our nature. The heavenly bodies are good because they're moving in a certain logical, they're doing what the logic suggests. The animals who work around are good because they're doing what they're made to do. Human beings are not good. We're given the possibility of being good. So, and this is a good example of it. We're also capable of being bad. Joe?
This is a slightly different line of inquiry, which I hope someday you will address. Probably not today, but we almost never study the power structures within the Israelites. Today we think Jews are all for equality, right? And maybe that's the American phenomenon that we impose upon Judaism. And when we daven, when we call to the Torah, we call the Kohanim, we call the Levites. But I'm wondering here, what was really going on in the power structure of Israel at the time when this happened? Because he calls on the Levites, that's the Revolutionary Guard, or whatever you want to call
Sure,
it today.
right.
To do his work, and it's really not about inequality. There's more going on studied Torah for years, but never really heard what's going on among Aaron's folks, among the other tribes. Is there something else that's a dynamic that teaches us about how we ought to organize ourselves today? And I don't know whether that ever gets studied.
Right.
I'd love to learn someday what you think about that.
I'd love to learn too. Yeah, I think what we'd probably find, but this sounds like an evasion before I've said it, is that there are going to be a variety of kinds of structure. I mean, the whole, the Shoftim, the judges, the leaders are very charismatic. They're raised up for a certain situation. When they solve the problem, they leave. Gideon is asked, after he solves the problem, Gideon's asked, stay and be our king. And he says, no, only God is king. That's one authoritative structure, the distribution of charismatic power. So I think we'd find a lot of different things. So people get tired of that, and it's a problem because the neighbors have much more organized structures.
What is the structure?
You mean here in the Torah?
Well, because we have Korah, we have other stories, but we never quite understand, is there a human dynamic that's for power
Right.
that's going on between the tribes that also plays into this? We talk about Moses and God.
Yep.
Is there some other structure that's going on there?
It's an interesting
that makes
point.
a political dynamic?
And from time to time over the years, we have taken particular themes like family and so on and looked at family structure in the Bible. We could do this too. It would be a big undertaking, not only to understand the different passages, but to decide what passages contribute to that discussion. But good, yeah, no, I think it's an interesting point. I'm inclined to go on a little bit. Shall I or not? Why don't we go on and try to finish the chapter? So let's see. Verse 26. Moses stood up in the gate of the camp. Whoever is for the Lord, come here. And the Levites rallied to him, and he said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put a sword on his thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay brother, neighbor, and kin. Talk about Doris's comment about brotherhood. Now this is brother against brother. The Levites did as Moses had bidden. Some 3,000 of the people fell that day. And Moses said, dedicate yourself to the Lord this day. And the phrase for dedicate is milu yadchem, which it literally is fill the hands. So this is a way of saying dedicated or even authorized in office. Okay, when somebody is elevated to a certain office, filling the hands is a way of saying it. And I say this because the commentaries, some of them say, this is the moment when the Levites are authorized in their role of serving the Mishkan. So they get authorization through this act of violence, which is an act, according to the Torah, of dedication to God. Dedicate yourselves to the Lord this day, for each of you has been against son and brother, that he may bestow a blessing upon you. V'latet aleichem hayom bracha. The next day Moses said to the people, you've been guilty of a great sin, yet I will now go up to the Lord. Perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin. Okay? So, as we've pointed out many times, Moses has two roles. There's a tripartite structure here. There's God, Moses, the people. Or more generally, God, the prophet, people. The prophet is poised between God and the people, and the arrow goes two ways. God transmits the word of God to the people, but Moses also transmits the need of the people to God. And this is that more pastoral activity of Moses, right? Yet I will now go up to the Lord, perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin. Moses went back to the Lord and said, Alas, this people is guilty of a great sin in making for themselves a god of gold. So it's clear that Moses thinks it's a great sin. Now, if you will forgive their sin, and then in brackets, well and good. It's not, the sentence isn't finished. But if not, erase me from the record which you have written. God offered Moses to be the new Abraham. Moses said no. Now it's the reverse. You can take me out of the story. Go back to the story up to this point and forward, and I don't want to be part of this story. But the Lord, so Moses is willing, whether it's psychological or to be taken literally, that Moses is really willing to go for the ultimate idea here. You have to be faithful to the people. You have to forgive them. And if you're not going to, for me, the story is over, at least my part of the story. But the Lord, that's heroic, isn't it? This is the heroism of Moses, sticking up for the people. I'm looking down and not at all the hands that might be raised at this point. He who has sinned against me, him only. So the Lord said to Moses, he who has sinned against me, him only will I erase from my record. So here God seems to be saying, I see it's a sin too, whether at the beginning of the story.
Who does he blot out?
Who what?
He says, God says he will blot out those who have sinned. Well, we don't hear about those that are blotted out.
We don't hear of the consequences of this.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay, good. Good. Okay. Yeah, really, all I can do is make an attempt. Go now, lead the people where I told you. See, my angel shall go before you. And the angel in the Hebrew is messenger. It's not the cherubic guys. But when I make an accounting, I will bring them to account for their sins. Then the Lord sent a plague upon the people for what they did with the calf that Aaron had made. He plagued them. You're working hard on this. Okay, very good. So, chapter 33 is utterly pivotal, where Moses now gets extremely close to God and is asking for information about God. Maybe we'll take it up in the future, but not at this moment. Lou, and then I think David, and then Ivan.
Where did they get these 3,000 people from? And the question is really, what was the purpose of the camp in the first place? Was it to replace God, or was it a way of people worshiping God in a kind of indirect way? Because if it's to replace God, then Aaron should have been one of those 3,000 people, because I'm thinking like you think of I think of like a Kusana Tokef. It's about someone saying, I'm not gonna kowtow to the people. I choose death instead of mercy. And Aaron seems to be very weak in this regard, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Because creating an idol is a cowardly thing for him to do.
Remember what Aaron says, give me your gold, make a calf. Tomorrow will be a festival to God, Adonai.
Right.
So one reading of that, may seem like a stretch, but one reading is that Aaron is really just engaging in a delaying tactic, hoping that Moses will come down in time, so that Aaron is really not complicitous in this act, according to this interpretation, but really trying to save the situation.
Well, he's getting gold because he's saying it's because to please God, or to
He's just hoping that he's going to be, by mollifying the people's needs, I see that you're anxious, give me your gold. Let me build the calf. Gosh, come on, Moses. It's getting awful hot here.
But the people who are giving them gold are they're looking to make a connection. And
Yeah, of course.
to Aaron, and,
Sure.
I mean, it may be a sin, but it's not like, they're not denying. It says in this chapter here that those who deny God should be put to death.
Yeah.
It doesn't say those who, worship God and,
It's clear from this chapter to me that something very decisive is going on here, and it requires cleansing. And something about human nature is at work here. I mean, it's very hard to hold on to our convictions under distress. I think there's some sympathy for the Israelites here, but also it exposes how fragile some of these commitments and covenants really are. Ivan?
Yeah, just two comments relating to Joe's comments. I have read commentaries about this passage.
Yes.
Put it in political terms.
Yeah.
And the commentators note that after the country split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, the northern country did have a golden calf, and they were sacrificing to the golden calf. And David, I think in the past you talked about archaeological evidence of a golden calf being found in the north. And some commentators view this whole thing as a polemic by the southerners against the north,
There you go.
and to say how bad the north is because they're worshiping the golden calf.
Absolutely. No, there are this interpretations, because they do set up golden calves there, that this story really is an indictment of the breakaway group that went to the north and created the northern kingdom. So that adds another possible political, even a macro political, not just in terms of power relations, but what actually happened.
And a second set of commentaries relates this to the Hanukkah story.
Mhm.
And the commentators talk about how one of the goals or one of the issues in Hanukkah was that idolatry was starting to creep into the temple worship, and the Maccabees were opposed to that and started their revolt.
The assimilationists, that it was more a civil war than a war against another regime.
And there's one commentator who thinks that some of these stories were added to the Bible by the Maccabees as justification of their civil war against the assimilationists.
Yeah. You think about the history of certain cultural givens. For example, take the Don Juan episode, and how many different iterations of the Don Juan episode there are. Mozart's Don Giovanni, for example. So in a certain way, this is just think about the discussion that we've had, how this story can be rendered, interpreted, applied in so many different ways because of the richness of the story itself. Yeah. The whole Faust legend, for example. Yeah. Okay, David, and I think maybe we're going to stop at some point.
I will make this very brief. During the discussion, there have been times when we said, well, the people didn't really sin because they hadn't gotten the word yet.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you read the story of the Ten Commandments, it appears that the people are standing at the foot of the mountain, and God says, don't make idols. It's like the first thing that God says to the people. So sometimes we argue, well, they didn't actually do it. But the text says, gods before my face. You shall not make a statue or any form that is in the skies above or that is in the earth below. You shall not bow to them, and you shall not serve them. I mean, it's the first commandment. And I think they did hear it. So the idea that they were completely innocent about this, I think, is not consistent with the text.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah,
The way I enjoined it on
Yes.
yeah. Okay, very good. All right, so now there's evidence that the people did hear and did. I mean, there is a commentary that suggests that they heard the first two, which includes the one that you've suggested. It's really the second commandment.
Yeah.
Anochi, I am the Lord your God, is the first by this kind of rendering, right? And there's an argument between Maimonides and Nachmanides about whether it's a commandment. Maimonides says yes, as he would, because he wants to prove there is a God. And Nachmanides says no, it's an introduction. So the way you can count them differs as well. But nevertheless, your point is this one is right up front. They probably heard it, and therefore, tough luck, Arthur.
Well, I wasn't saying they hadn't heard it. I'm saying there's tension.
There's tension there.
My point was about the craft of the narrative. It's
Okay.
excruciating.
No question. Who would like to summarize the discussion? Okay, Rich, as always. Shabbat Shalom. Oh,
This is a wonderful book.
is it?
Have you read it?
I have not. I know.
It's really terrific.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so nice.
Pass it on to Adrian if you want.
I will. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good. Have you been in touch with Carol recently?
I went to see her.
I sure had hoped and wished that long ago she would have gone to some place to have some company. I mean, it's not that she's a social person, but she likes good conversation.
I talked to her about going somewhere. She said, well, I knew it helped. And I said, well, she's got the money. She can afford to have it.
Place. I'll have to call her and get over there. I did see her a month ago, but again. It's great that you're so attentive to her. Oh, she's a great person. And her heyday, but not too long. Oh, yes, sure. No question.
She's not doing great things.
There you go. Big distinction. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Last thing we needed was another tangent. Part of his point about the elevation of the priesthood is that think about taking Rashi kind of bails out. He knows this problem. Rashi kind of bails out here and says we don't have this sorcerer. He said he and sorcerer. So he mentioned that and he excuses it. And you know, there's a lot of things where he puts that's one of them. It says, and they further told in and the sorcerer was being so he's not just making up a false excuse according to Russia. So that further elevates him and excuses him from being punished.
They work hard.
Yeah. I knew there was a division. No doubt.
reintroduce the universalism.
And certainly it's what this is, you know, figure out structure. This is sitting at the top, so to speak, of the superstructure, and therefore it gives me this
Thanks very much. I'm sorry. I know, that's why I put my hand down. So I thought, there's enough tangents here. And you mentioned summarizing. I think it would take Leo to a story about 1,000
Oh, there
pages
you
to
go.
do it.
Somebody said to him,
Let me take it. Very good. Thanks again. Good session.
You're not moving to Italy?
oh, because of,
They seem like they seem to be in the passage.
oh, I'm not following it that much. So Italy beat Mexico
And United States.
after the,
Right, they beat the United States and then they beat Mexico.
but is the United States out of it now?
No, they beat Canada last night.
Oh, did they? You're following this.
Well, I recently, you know, was I suppose, you know, I could, get my glove and Italy, you know,
You still have your glove?
you know, at Pelham Park.
Were you a ball player in your youth?
I played up until college age, you know, with the choose-up game, you know, what's it?
Did you play in high school on team?
No, I was at
Yeah, pickup games.
pickup games, you know. It's fun, you know. I played more softball than baseball.
Okay, also for me, I played a lot of fast pitch softball, which is very
Yeah, that's, you know, my wife's cousin, she was a pitcher, and I said, we got a bunch of pitchers. I said, well, how they get those?
The ball rises and they're close. You gotta start swinging before they. Good. Good meeting. Next Friday. I'll start picking up. All nighter on Thursday. An all nighter on Thursday.
So, I had one just all the Levites rallied to Moses. It says all the Levites. And then he says, go kill your brother. He's your brother. If all the Levites, so we're talking about all the rest of the Israelites.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Your brother's here, right? He came too, because you're all Levites. You all came.
Yeah, so you can't force the numbers. So you have to if a Levite married an Israelite, then they will now as Levites. And some Levites can be killed. So there's a recognition, I think, that of the problem you're pointing to. But where did I do it? I see it, maybe Rashi. Yeah. But that's an interesting point.
I also liked your sports analogy. So guys, everybody else is the players, and so the coach and the players have this dialogue about the game and how you play it.
And a good coach is going to
Listen to the players.
He's the what? General manager. He's sitting up in the stands. Moses is the coach. Oh, that is funny.
In the Steinbrenner model, I'm not quite sure which template we're applying to.
Steinbrenner is God.
I'd like to hear that.
Oh, he's heard it from himself many times. Yeah. Oh, Steinbrenner was really something. had he been the president of the Kansas City Royals, nobody would care. I mean, the Yankees. That's what they were boys.
Anyway, I have a more utilitarian question.
Oh, okay.
My wife's yesterday she was visited by a hospital chaplain. So have you ever been a hospital chaplain?
No, but I go to the hospital.
So, right, so, chaplains are of one religion, could be Christian, Muslim, Jewish. The question is, what's appropriate, what do you think is appropriate, a Christian chaplain would come in, and what would be a meaningful dialogue, for someone who may need, some inspiration, whatever you call it.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I'm saying,
Would you like me to come in?
well,
I'm glad to.
I'll tell her maybe so. It's another 3 weeks before next week. She's an outpatient.
I'm glad to come to the house.
All right. Well, I'll talk to my wife.
Really?
But because the question I had, it's like